And now I want to introduce the first speaker. This is Cesar Sengupta, the VP from Google, and he is the man who's leading the charge to make Singapore an engineering hub. He's the guy who wants to make 100,000 new Indonesian developers. He's the guy who acquired Pi, and he is here to tell us about how he is building for the next billion users. So please give a warm welcome to Cesar Sengupta.
Maybe we were born with fire and gold in our eyes.
Good morning, everyone. It's fantastic to see so many people awake and energetic early in the morning. Feeling good? A little bit more energy. Yeah, come on. Right, I'm Cesar Sengupta. I lead the Next Billion User Initiative at Google. And what the organizers thought would be interesting was if I could share some of what we've learned at Google, working on serving these important set of users. And then I'd love to hear from you on what you've learned, working and building products for the people in this region. So to quickly get started, and just taking a step back, we are in the middle of an amazing time in history. Today, there are about 3 billion users on the internet. About 1 billion more will join over the next couple of years. Never before in the history of mankind has a technology been adopted so fast and has had such a profound impact on pretty much every part of technology. Just think of the number of businesses many of you are building, that we're building, to capitalize on this massive, massive technological disruption. And so at Google, we currently have about 7 products with 1 billion users. And one of the things we've started thinking a lot about is how do we serve our next billion users? The next billion users who will start using Google's products, who will start using technology products, who are starting to become members of the online world. And so here's some of the stuff that we've learned about them. First, good news for all of us here. They're largely in APAC. I love this map because if you look at the circle that's shaded in gray, there are more people who live inside that circle than outside. There are more people who live inside that small circle than outside. That's truly amazing. And for people building technology and products, where better to be than in the middle of all this? So, I like joking with my colleagues in the US that in Singapore, I am 6 hours flying distance from half the world's population. And it's all about location, location, location. Second, these users are very different in many ways from the first billion users who've started using Google's products or any of your products. They're largely mobile, and in the case of the APAC, in many cases, only mobile, which is very different from how many of us started using computers in this world. Raise your hand if the first computing device you used was a laptop or a desktop. Anyone here whose first computing device was a smartphone? I don't see any hands, right? But the next billion users, most of these users, their first device they'll start using is the smartphone, and that's pretty much the only device they'll use. So the way they're using computing, the way they're using services, the way they think of products and services is very different. And we have to adapt our thinking as product builders and as engineers to build the right services and tailor it for them. It's also interesting that from a user demographic perspective, this audience is also very different. So in this chart, you can look at like India, Indonesia, Brazil, and then compare it to the US. One of the things you'll notice first is most of these users are very young. We're looking at people who are largely under 25 and just starting to use products and services. So again, it reiterates the point that they don't have many of the learned habits that many of us in this room have. So we have to think differently about how we help them come onto the internet and what habits they'll pick up. Second, most of these countries, India, Indonesia, Brazil, are not very urban right now, but they're urbanizing very, very fast. And this rate of urbanization is actually giving rise to many more opportunities for us to build products and services for them. The third point that I usually talk about, I think it'll be intimately familiar to all of you, but often when I'm talking to an audience in the US, it's useful to identify. People tend to think of users either as exactly like themselves, so having the same spending power as people in the US, or tend to think of them as a poor farmer in Nigeria. the poor farmer in Nigeria is an important user base, and we will build products for them. But most of the next billion users are not as poor as that. They're above the poverty line. They're part of the middle class. They have disposable income. But the time value of money for them is very different from what it means for many of us in this room or for many of the users who've been using computing so far. So I think we need to deeply think about how we bring the same high-quality experiences that we are building for the rest of the world to these users, but package it in a way that is more affordable and more accessible to these users. What's interesting also is that these users often, because of the time value of money, are extremely savvy about the choices they're making. How many of you here have sort of been to a mobile store in Philippines and tried to buy a data pack? Has anyone done that? You'd have realized the amount of choices you get are astounding. But when you talk to the people buying these data packs, you'll realize that they're making these choices day in and day out, and they are very, very careful and specific, and they understand exactly what they're doing. So these are users who may be new to computing, but they're very savvy. They understand what they're doing. They understand the choices they're making. So you have to be able to offer them those kinds of choices. Second, they're also very different from each other. Again, one of the things tech companies tend to do is we tend to group all these users into one group. We say, these are the emerging markets users, or we say, these are the next billion users. But the reality is, a user in Vietnam is actually different from a user in Indonesia. It's different from a user in Malaysia. And you have to understand the local differences and the nuances very well, the cultural differences, the choice differences. And so it's very important to understand that they're unique and then cater the services and products to them. But at the fundamental end of the day, there are certain common themes that you'll find across all these regions, across all these users. They all want to connect. They all want to transact and buy services, products. They all want to make their lives better. Education is important to everyone. And so it's important to remember that we shouldn't try to build products that are, in some ways just for these users. You can build products that work across a wide set of users if you're able to tap into the fundamental needs and then modify it, tweak it for the regional changes. Another common fact across these regions is the environment they're in. So first, low-spec phones. 30% of the phones that will be sold in India this year will have 512 MBs of memory on them or less. Have any of you used a phone with 512 MBs of memory? Oh my God, it's pretty awful, right? And so, but the important thing for us is we have to build our products and services for these users. Otherwise, they'll use a product or an app that works for them on that phone, right? They're not going to go spend twice the money and buy another phone just because our product doesn't work on that phone. Connectivity is a challenge across this user base. Even in places where your phone says it's got 3G or 4G connectivity, the backhaul may be significantly constrained. It may have a lot of traffic on it or may just be running over microwave. And so it's really important to be able to think about building products that work very well, even when there's patchy connectivity. So I'll talk a little bit about what we are doing at Google to help with this and to build on this. And third, localized content. Many of the next billion users are not going to be as familiar as you or I in English. So it's really important for us to be able to bring content to them in their languages. So, for Google, it's not new to be serving these users. It's kind of, Larry and Sergey, when they took the company public, laid out our mission statement. And so we keep going back to this. It's, we wanted to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And the word universally is something that we hold deeply true to our hearts. So we've been working hard for many years at trying to make sure our products and services work for as many people around the world. You'd have heard of some of these products. Again, as search, for example, is available in 159 languages. YouTube, Android, Play are in over 70 languages. But what's interesting is that beyond just being products, each of these is also a platform, on top of which there are developers, there are content producers who are building large, vibrant businesses. And our goal is to make sure that they can do that in the languages and for the regions that they are in. So if you look at YouTube and you go to either Indonesia or Philippines, you'll see a vibrant community of people producing great video content in Bahasa, in Tagalog, for the countries. And that's pretty important for us. And I don't need to talk about Android and Play. I'm sure many of you are building large businesses on top of Android and Play. Thank you for that. Second, we're starting to work a lot on bringing connectivity to the world. You've all heard about Project Loon. One project I wanted to spend a little bit more time on talking about is bringing Wi-Fi to railway stations in India. We're working very closely with the government on this, with RailTel, and we've started working on bringing open Wi-Fi connectivity to train stations around. And it's fascinating to see how people walking through the train stations, using public transport, are actually connecting and using a multitude of apps, multitude of sites to get the information and the content and the services they need. And we're going to continue doing that and hope to try to scale it much beyond where we have it right now. We're also doing a lot of work on making our products faster, more relevant for the markets, and lighter. We did a new version of search in Indonesia. We launched it first in Indonesia last year, which improved the speed of search by about 4x by the search page and reduced the amount of data by over 10x. And that instantly meant people could do much more of many more searches using the same data packs they had. It's been extremely popular, and we're now trying to roll it out across to many other countries. What this screenshot is showing is the immersive experience we did for the Cricket World Cup in India that just ended. And anyone who searches for the Cricket World Cup would have seen what we call this immersive one-box experience. But what was interesting was, in this case, we actually made it really interactive. People could go and spend a lot of time. They could learn about the teams. They could learn about the players. And again, this turned out to be incredibly popular. This was one of our most popular immersive experiences we've done inside Search. And we've done similar ones for Bollywood movies. And we're continuing to do similar ones for other countries around here. And this is something that we want to continue working on, because this brings experiences that are relevant and locally meaningful for users in countries around here. I talked a little bit about the connectivity challenges. So we've been working a lot on making sure our products work very well offline and even when you're on a patchy network. So last year, we launched YouTube offline. What this does is, in India or Indonesia or Philippines, you can just press a button and take a video offline for about 48 hours. And initially we thought, this is an interesting feature. People will use it when it's offline. It turned out to be incredibly popular. And we saw this use case develop where people would go to internet cafes, download a whole bunch of videos, and then watch videos for the rest of the day. And it also turned out that it was extremely popular for music or stuff that you watch again and again, right? So it became so well used that then we've decided, now we've rolled it out to about 70 countries around the world. We've been working on bringing maps offline. So now if you're in any country, you can take a map of, say, Jakarta offline, and even if the network is slightly patchy, it'll still give you directions and help you get from place A to place B without any challenges. And we're going to continue working on making sure more of our products work offline seamlessly so that users can use it. The last area I wanted to talk a little bit about is the importance of local languages. Translate is a product that's used by many, many people and widely loved. Have any of you used Visual Translate? If you haven't, you've got to try it out. Just open your Translate app, click on the camera, point it at any text in English, and it'll translate what you see in place into the language you wanted to translate. It is mind-boggling. It's an amazing example of how machine learning can bring a very, very simple experience to users that's been extremely popular. And we're continuing to make Translate better. We're adding this feature called Tap to Translate that we demoed in December in India, where in any app, you can select content and then instantly have it translate in place. And you can imagine how useful it can be for users as they use a multitude of apps across their products. But to make this even better, over the last few years, we've been organizing these translate-a-thons, where we get together a volunteer community across a country and help them translate their language and make it much better for everyone to use. So this is an area that we've spent a lot of time on, and we're going to continue spending more time on to make sure that people can access the internet and our products and services in any language they're comfortable with. So this is still very, very early. This was a brief glimpse of sort of what we've been doing so far. And there's a ton more ahead for us to still do. And we're looking forward to working with all of you as well as sort of serving our users in this region and seeing what more we can do here. Thank you so much. It's fantastic being here.
Thank you very much. That was Caesar Sengupta. And we're going to keep you on stage because we do have a fireside chat right after this. So I would love, please come to the middle.
Thank you.
Let's see your wonderful face. And I'm going to call in Willis Wee, our founder of Tech in Asia. Willis, come on stage.
Maybe we were born with fire and gold in our eyes. With fire and gold in our eyes.
Whew, okay, was rushing around. Yeah. Thanks for coming, Caesar. Thanks a lot. Great crowd
Thanks for
over here.
having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. I think that was a very, really good presentation. You cleared a lot of things. Yeah. So just like the very first question, I think everyone knows you, so I'll just skip the question. But do you want to introduce yourself again?
Do you want me to do the whole talk again?
No. Maybe just like a one-liner. Like, what do you do at Google?
So I lead our Next Billion User initiative, which it basically works on trying to help our current products work better for the next billion users, as well as build new products and services for the next billion users.
Okay, so so you basically lead the next billion users team, correct?
Yes.
So what exactly is the function, and what exactly is the goal?
So I think the goal at some level is first, we have a number of products that are working very well globally. We want to try to go deeper and invest more in sort of making them work better for countries like India, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam. So we're spending a lot of time with users in these regions, understanding what the specific needs are, how we can tweak the product. For example, YouTube Offline was one example where we worked on understanding the exact context of the users there and working with the YouTube team to bring that to market. And as well as we're looking at new opportunities there and trying to see what new products we can build.
Okay, so since you're talking about a billion users, correct? Yeah, but why do you start in Singapore? Like, we only have like 5 million people.
Oh, so
You have like 995
no, the Next Billion
million
User
people.
initiative is global.
Okay.
I live in Singapore. I moved here moved back a year and a half back. So we have teams across, obviously in Mountain View, where we're headquartered. We have teams in India. We have teams in Sydney, and now we're building an engineering team and an engineering hub in Singapore.
Okay, so I want to like put the focus onto Indonesia, right? And then there are a lot of news about Google in Indonesia, and one of the like things that struck us is Google intends to train like 100,000 engineers, right? So like
Android developers.
Android developers specifically, yes, no iOS, yeah. So, okay, yeah.
So it's a reflection of what the users are using in Indonesia.
Exactly, yeah. It's like 90%, more than that, in fact, yeah. So I just want to ask, like, are there any future plans to create an engineering hub in Indonesia, right? Because you're training so many of them. I mean, you just can't then let them go, right?
No, I'm hoping they'll work across many of the startups, many of whom are in this room. And
Of course.
The tech sector in Indonesia is booming. Very, very exciting seeing all the interesting companies come out there. Part of our strategy with Android is a platform, right? We are very, very happy when more people develop on top of Android. They build large businesses, they build large products, because that makes the world a much better place for every user of Android. So right now we have, we don't pre-announce our plans to start an office anywhere. So I'm focused on making
But
sure.
do you have a plan?
Sorry?
Do you have a plan?
We don't pre-announce our plans to start anything anywhere.
Oh, okay. Got it.
But in the sense, Indonesia is a very important country for us. We're seeing some very interesting trends in terms of usage there. I spend a lot of time in Indonesia. We're trying to build products to work much better for Indonesia. And we're hoping and working with many of these Indonesian developers, we'll be able to serve the users better there.
I see. Okay, so there's also like the Google Launchpad, right? It's kind of like an accelerator, incubator that helps to like create like startups, for like create startups for the Indonesian market, right? So how does that work? Like, why only in Indonesia? Why don't we see the same initiative in, say, for example, like Vietnam? Or like, because I read on the website, it's only for like Brazil, so there's certain selective countries.
Yeah, so that's just a question of scaling.
Okay.
So we've I don't know the specific countries we're doing Launchpad in, but I think it's India, Indonesia, Brazil, and it's an early effort. We're growing it. The goal with that is to support startups, support companies that are building on Android. So what we do is we actually help them, use Android much more effectively, make the best use of like all the new APIs that have come up, help them like sort of become much more vibrant companies, and then we hope they'll build great businesses on top of Android and Play.
So one of the key initiatives, correct me if I'm wrong, right, is basically Android One. Since we're talking about Android, right? So Android One is basically a more affordable version of an Android phone, for the developing market. So there's a lot of oh, this thing's gonna be great and everything, but in the end, it didn't really turn out to be that great. Yeah. So I just want to know your thoughts on that. Like there's so many things like, oh, Android One is cool and everything, but didn't really work out as intended, didn't it? Huh?
I think Android One is still pretty cool, but it's actually we're very happy with how Android One has gone. Android One now is in about roughly 20 odd countries, pretty much around the world. And one of the big reasons for trying to do Android One was to encourage OEMs and hardware manufacturers and make it easier for them to update the phones. As many developers here would know, like if users have an updated phone, then you can cater, to use the latest functionalities that are there on the phone. And what's interesting, and I'd like to take you back to like just 2 years back, if you were in a market in Delhi and trying to buy a phone, nobody would have been talking about updates. But just a year and a half later, now if you walk into a store in India, you'll see a ton of OEMs promising updates. So I think what we realized when we run a large ecosystem like Android, sometimes we can play a catalytic role in moving the ecosystem in a direction that's good for users. And so Android One, we feel, has been very successful in sort of playing that catalytic role and getting people to be serious about updates, to think about updates. And of course, we're going to continue working on that. There's as all of you know, like bringing updates to users is a tough technical problem. So we're working with OEMs, we're working with the factories in China, the ODMs, we're working with the silicon vendors. And it's an effort that we'll keep working on through, over many years till like we feel like it has had a substantial impact on our users.
Okay, so Google's making a lot of efforts to reach to the next billion users. So there's just so many things that I can name. Of course, like Google Launchpad is one of them, right? Android One is one of them. Project Loon is like the balloon internet, right? And then you have like YouTube offline, Maps offline. Everything's all very like mobile centric. So there are a lot of things going on, mobile and Android centric, of course. So there are a lot of things that's going on, right? So just really want to ask like how all these pieces match together, and then basically tell a consistent story and strategy that Google is trying to play.
Yeah. Look, the consistent strategy is very simple. We tend to think of it in terms of like access products and platforms, right? So working with operators, working with our partners in many of these markets to help make access much better. Loon is one that you talked about. Railtel, the project that you're doing with Railtel in India is another, where we're trying to bring open access through Wi-Fi in railway stations across India. A lot of the products that you mentioned are efforts that we're doing in that, and then platforms we're trying to make sure like YouTube and Android and Play support developers in each of these regions, so that they can help us reach the next billion users more effectively.
I see. Okay. So let's just zoom in back to Singapore, and of course like Singapore tech talent, right? So recently Google bought some pie. So like just to be very very direct, how much did you pay for the pie?
The one I had in the morning, or the company?
The company.
No, we don't talk about how much we spend on acquisition.
A rough valuation is okay, to be honest. Yeah, and we promise to keep it off the record. Yeah, like everyone promised. Yeah.
Yeah. A rough valuation is also something that we don't normally talk about.
That's too bad, man. Okay, guys, I tried.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can keep trying.
I will later on. I think something that's really interesting for most like entrepreneurs and even investors, right, is to really find out like what is the backstory behind this pie deal. Like, really interested to find out how do you meet the team, how do you find out about the team, and then what made Google make that acquisition.
Yeah. So I think many of you know the pie team, many of you know the founders. What really impressed us about the team was their team of really smart, I'll use the word googly engineers and product managers who seem to get mobile very well. They build beautiful mobile products. As we were starting the engineering team in Singapore, we wanted to find good mobile developers and mobile engineers. And this was a team that just, when we met them, we spoke to them, they just fit culturally very well with us. So we thought, we'd do much more stuff together than as they were at that point. And so, I'm super excited to be working with like Thais and Peter and that whole team. Super, super exciting team. They're doing some incredible stuff, and hopefully we'll work on some great products together.
So after the acquisition, Pi, the product itself was closed down, right? So what are they doing right now?
They're working on a bunch of the products that we talked about,
Okay.
like how to bring products to the next billion.
Okay.
They may or may not be working on some new products.
What is the new product? Let's just like get to that.
They may or may not be working on a new product.
Okay. Yeah. I'll try later. So it's interesting that you mentioned about like this googly factor, right? Building beautiful mobile products. So there are actually a lot of like very, very smart founders, engineers, very, very good startups out there. So just really want to pick your thoughts. Like, what are some other companies that you think that, well, like this company will be great, to serve whatever problems that we have in Southeast Asia? What are some of the startups that you think personally, right? And you may not want to represent Google, of course, that you think is great?
Look, there's some incredible companies that are in Singapore, right? Like now, there are a number of unicorns. I see what Garena is doing. Super exciting, very, very innovative company. We just saw Lazada, the big news about Lazada this morning. Very interesting. I think there are a number of other smaller startups also that are doing very well. Smart Karma, which is doing some very interesting stuff in fintech. Smooth. There's a bunch of other companies that that are doing very interesting stuff. For me, what's exciting is I've come back to Singapore after 10 years, and in 10 years back, I was in a startup in Singapore called Accentuate. And now the ecosystem here is so much more vibrant. There's just so much interesting technical stuff that's happening. It's really exciting being here. So I wish I had more time to spend talking to startups and finding out more about the cool stuff they're doing. But every time I manage to get out, I get inspired by the stuff that's happening here. So we're constantly talking to startups, constantly looking at technologies, and seeing what we can do together with people.
So you mentioned about companies like Smooth, et cetera, et cetera. Do you intend to buy them?
No, I just my credit card limit doesn't exist that much. But no, jokes apart, these are companies that I admire as a user, as just somebody in the tech ecosystem. And I'm just excited that there's interesting stuff that's happening here. In case I ever get fired from Google, there's more stuff I can do here.
Okay, so that brings an interesting point, right? Like, how does Google decide to just hire and to acqui-hire? How does that work? Just try and explain to us.
So look, we're hiring aggressively. So if there are people here who want to build cool products for people in the region, please come and talk to us. We are, all our jobs are listed. You can direct message me, connect to me on LinkedIn. We're hiring very aggressively. That's actually a much easier way to join Google than through an acquisition. But in terms of acquisitions, we're constantly looking at interesting companies out there. Typically most companies that Google buys tend to be very small. They tend to be culturally very similar to Google. They're very focused on products, very focused on users, very focused on building great technology. And we're almost always talking to companies, trying to see what they're doing, trying to see the team, and if something makes sense for us to do together, we try to bring them on.
Any interesting themes that you found in Southeast Asia? I could give you my 2 cents worth.
I'd love to hear from you.
But you have to tell me the company first.
Are you talking about tech in Asia?
No, definitely not. We're not selling. Yeah. Okay. So it's very interesting that Google, wants to start an engineering hub in Singapore, right? So as a Singaporean, I don't see much difference. Okay, maybe there's a bit of difference, but I don't see much difference now and 2 to 3 years ago. Definitely much more vibrant, as you said. But why now? Why not like 2 to 3 years ago?
Well, I wish we could have set it up 2 or 3 years ago. I think largely one of the reasons here was, as we started thinking about the region, we wanted to find an office that was sort of in the middle of this vibrant region where a lot of our users are. You know, you build the best products when you're really close to your users. You want the engineering teams to be using the products themselves, to be interacting with our users. And so it kind of made sense. The other big thing was I moved back last year, so you know, it kind of it worked very well together for both those reasons.
So you mentioned
The other thing about Singapore, if I can just mention,
please.
you know, often I get asked why not like Indonesia or Vietnam or Philippines. What's interesting is if you look at this whole region, right? Singapore's right in the middle of it. Like nobody goes and asks like, why don't you have offices, you know, in every city in the U.S.? You know, we have offices in the major cities around the U.S. So Singapore I kind of see as representative of the overall region. Connectivity here is great. We have fantastic tech talent here. So we'll start here, and you know, we have a number of engineering centers, and over the course of time, if the need comes, we will build more engineering offices in different countries.
Okay. So earlier you mentioned that like Singapore is becoming an up and coming, of course, like a very strong tech hub, right? So we just want to understand what is your definition of a good technology hub?
I think good technology hub is, in many ways, if you think of like, look at Silicon Valley, or look at Israel, or look at Bangalore. You know, you have this constant pace of new companies starting. You have some large companies. You have just this vibrancy in terms of new ideas coming through, new products being built, people trying to serve the users. And I think I'm starting to see that happen here. There's funding is available now in plentiful in Singapore. One would argue too much. And we have some very good people building interesting technologies here. The government, as you know, is also supporting the tech industry in a very strong way and wants to do more there, which is fantastic. And I think, you know, looking at this broad region, I'm pretty excited to see that, Singapore has the potential to become this broad tech hub.
So in your opinion, what are some of the things that are, some of the factors that are lacking that you think that, like if we as the tech community could move towards a certain direction or do certain things much better, what's your take?
I think some amount of it is just the maturity of the tech ecosystem. I think, at some level, I think if we need to, as a tech community, need to get a lot more focused on users and product. Sometimes in Singapore, we tend to be very sort of engineering focused and just the technology. I think as we learn to talk more about how to explain our products better, be able to paint a broader vision, I think that'll help users understand what we as technologists in Singapore are doing. I think that'll happen over time. I think also, like, as we're starting to see more and more global tech talent come to Singapore. And I think the more we can do to encourage that, both as a country as well as a tech ecosystem, the more we'll sort of be able to bring the best ideas, the best insights into our community, and that'll make us stronger. So those are some of the things that I think we should do more of.
So I think there are a lot of Singaporeans in Google Mountain View, right? Very brilliant engineers. Do you think that by having them back to Singapore would really enhance the technology ecosystem in Southeast Asia? What do you think?
Oh, we're working hard on that. About last month, I organized this Come Back to Singapore event in the Bay Area, and that was an open event for we attracted people from obviously Google, but also Facebook, Twitter, other startups there. It was basically trying to tell Singaporeans, please come back. Like, come back to Singapore, spend a few months, see that it's not quite the Singapore of your father's time or your mother's time. It's changed a lot. There's a vibrant tech community there. So one of the requests I have for every one of you is, like, if you have cousins or friends in the Bay Area, try to get them to come and stay in Singapore for 3 months and spend time with the tech ecosystem here. And they'll see that this is very vibrant. It's very exciting in many ways. Being able to be so close to this fast-growing region, to so many new users, is super exciting as a technologist. So I hope you guys will help me attract more Singaporeans back.
So in your earlier days at Google, you're basically managing products, right? So what products are you basically managing?
So I've worked across a bunch of products, but most of my time at Google I spent building Chrome OS, Chromebooks.
So I just want to pick a little bit more about your experience at Chromebooks. So can you share with us like some of the challenges when you're building Chromebooks and Chrome OS? What are some of the challenges that you face?
Well, one of the biggest challenges we were trying to go up against an ecosystem that has largely been effectively served by one company for the last 30 years. It was PCs, right? And there's really never been another alternative that has ever appeared to PCs. Everybody would use Windows. I think that's still largely the case in Singapore, right? And Macs made a big dent, but we felt that we could play a much bigger part in making computing affordable and accessible to many more people, right? We cared not just about the high-end and the premium users, but about everyone. So that was sort of the big motivating insight behind starting Chrome OS, and that's what motivated us. Many of us were really inspired by the one laptop per child, which many of you might have heard of, the $100 laptop. And through the years, we've constantly been trying to work towards achieving that, working with partners at scale. We're right now at like $149 in the US with Hisense and Haier both have $149 Chromebooks, and Asus launched this $80 Chromebit, which is like literally this desktop computer you can plug into your TV. And so that's largely sort of what we were trying to tackle. Still a way to go, but we're very, very happy where we are.
So you've built like products for basically the Western market, right? And then right now you're building products for the Southeast Asian market. So far in your experience, like what have you learned so far? And what can you share with us?
So I'd say, in many ways, the Chromebook experience is also directly related to what I'm doing. As I said at the start, we wanted to make computing much more accessible. We started in the US, but interestingly, the sector where Chromebooks really exploded was education. Schools in the US wanted an accessible, approachable device they could buy and deploy to everyone. And that's, it's not just been proven out in the US. Now Chromebooks outsell every other device in the US to schools. We have over 50% share. But even in countries outside the US, Western Europe, Australia, it's been taking off. What's interesting is if you look at like a country like Malaysia, Malaysia has now given Chromebooks out to every school in Malaysia. And it's available not just in like the big cities in Malaysia, but in smaller towns and rural areas in Malaysia, where the kids there have the same computing and the same access to the same resources that kids in the larger cities in KL have. And so that's something that we've continued doing. So I think in many ways, like for me at least personally, it's really important to make sure like the services and the products we're building work for everyone. And so that's sort of been a overriding sort of goal and mission behind a lot of stuff I've done.
Okay, so I think that's really interesting. The interesting part about like product management, right? Like you really talk to users, and then you really find out like what are their pain points, and then you basically serve their needs, correct? So in your own research or opinion, like what are some of the biggest problems that technology can solve in the Southeast Asian market?
I think the opportunities are huge, right? If you look at as users are starting to use mobile, right, being able to deliver information to them, helping them find out more, learn more, grow more in their lives is a tremendous opportunity, right? And we are doing a lot of stuff there, but there's also many other companies that are serving that need. Payments is huge. Being able to buy and transact easily on your phone is fantastic. Credit cards don't get used much in our region outside of Singapore. And so, mobile payments is a big area. I think in general, like, we're seeing e-commerce do incredibly well across the region, right? And I think as time progresses, people's lives are going to, in many ways, move more and more online, right? Like a lot of services that they use in the real world today, they'll be trying to use online means to access the same services. Just look at like what Gojek is doing, for example, in Jakarta, right? Super interesting. And so I think the number of opportunities that are open for us are vast, and there's lots of interesting stuff we can do here.
I don't think Google will get into e-commerce. Maybe I'm wrong, but Google might actually get into payments. Is that correct?
We actually have Android Pay and
exactly.
plays a thriving payments ecosystem on it, where we cater to developers both through paid apps, but also through in-app payments. I mean, that's a pretty big part of like every developer's strategy. So we're pretty much in that space already and doing a lot.
Yeah, so I want to like dig a little deeper on that because I realized that like in certain countries you can actually pay using your like using what's that called, like the prepaid card, right?
Gift cards.
Yeah, gift cards. Yeah, or like basically like airtime payment, right? In Indonesia.
True, yes, exactly.
Yeah. So how like, because that is like a very different adjustment, right? As compared to like the product as a whole, as a whole for the international market. So how does that work? Like how does like the decision actually come about that, okay, you're like, we have to report to HQ that people are not using credit card and that they are using this and that's why we need to have this?
So look, decisions at Google are fairly distributed. So teams are empowered to make decisions to serve users very close to the users. So where we see people aren't using credit cards, we will try to serve them using whatever form of payment they want to. So in some countries, net banking or internet banking is the predominant form of payment. And different countries, for different reasons, regulations, practices evolve in different ways. We will provide internet banking for them. In countries where people are used to using mobile carriers and paying from their carrier wallet, operator wallet, we work with operators to make that available. For us, like it's we don't have any biases towards a particular form of payment or not. Like if users want to pay and developers want to get paid in any currency, a developer doesn't care what form of payment it's coming in. So for us, our job is to serve and build those connections.
So what are some of the new initiatives or products that we can expect? What are you building now?
We not ready to talk about it right now.
Come on. Just roughly, like what is it about?
Roughly, we're going to build products that serve the next billion users.
Fair enough. Yeah. That's it? Anything else to add?
You want something more than that?
Yes, for sure.
We'll build products to serve the next billion users after that too.
Okay. So very clearly, you're very focused on the 1 billion users. Last question. Like in 5 years, like what does success, look like for this project of yours? Like describe to us.
I think success looks like for any other Google product, right? More users using our product, more users using it more frequently. We have a very simple way of measuring success for any product at Google. We look at how many people are actively using it, actively defined as using it like every week, every month. And so all the features we build, all products we build, we evaluate using the same metric. And that's exactly how we'll evaluate success on these two.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. So if you happen to want to run through some companies with me, I'll be more than happy to give you my 2 cents worth.
Are you trying to sell Tech in Asia again?
No, not really. Yeah, I'm trying to buy Google. Okay, thanks a lot, Caesar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you
very much.
Thank you, guys.